The strangest part wasn't waking up in a hospital bed with tubes in my arm. It wasn't the beeping machines or the antiseptic smell that clung to everything. The strangest part was lying there, perfectly still, listening to my son talk about selling my house and choosing not to say a word. Let me back up. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a high school history teacher in Dayton, Ohio, and another 12 doing part-time consulting work after I retired. My wife, Eleanor, God rest her, passed 4 years ago from pancreatic cancer, 7 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. That kind of loss changes the architecture of your days. The silence in the house after that wasn't peaceful. It was just empty. My son is 41. I'll call him by what he is to me. My son, his wife, my daughter-in-law, I'll call her what she became, a stranger wearing a familiar face. They live about 20 minutes from me, in a newer subdivision with a homeowners association that sends letters if your grass gets too long. We'd had dinner together every Sunday for years. I thought that meant something. About 8 months after Eleanor passed, I had a mild stroke. The doctors called it a TIA at first, a transient ischemic attack, but then the imaging showed more, and mild became a word they stopped using. I lost the use of my right hand for about 6 weeks. My speech came back slowly, and while it came back scrambled. Some words wouldn't come when I called them. Others arrived in the wrong order. The neurologist, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Okafor, explained that what I was experiencing was aphasia. My brain's language center had taken a hit. I could understand everything perfectly. I just couldn't always speak it back cleanly. My son drove me home from the hospital after 2 weeks of inpatient rehab. He was attentive, concerned. He set up my medications on the kitchen counter in one of those weekly pill organizers, Sunday through Saturday, morning and evening. He programmed his number into my phone as the first contact and showed me how to use the voice-to-text feature so I could communicate when talking felt like pushing words through wet cement. I was grateful. That's the honest truth. I was grateful and I was scared, and I was glad he was there. He and his wife started coming over more. Dinner a few nights a week. They had a key, had for years, for emergencies. She would sometimes arrive before he got off work and start something on the stove, and I'd come downstairs and smell onions and butter and feel, briefly, like the house had a heartbeat again. What I didn't know was that they were also making phone calls. A lot of them. It was a Thursday afternoon in late February. I know it was Thursday because the trash trucks had come through, and I'd watched them from the kitchen window, the way I'd started watching small things since the stroke. Birds at the feeder. Eleanor had hung. The mail carrier's schedule. The way afternoon light moved across the living room floor. I had started sleeping in the recliner in the den some afternoons, partly because the stairs were still slow for me, and partly because Eleanor's reading chair was in that room, and it smelled, faintly and impossibly, still like her. I'd dozed off around 2. My son and his wife came in through the side door. The key, always the key, and I heard them come in, but I was in that half-sleep place where you don't quite surface. They went to the kitchen. I heard the refrigerator open, heard her put something down on the counter, heard my son pull out a chair. He fell asleep in the chair again, she said. Yeah, a pause. He does that a lot now. Did you talk to the advisor? This morning. She said with the VA benefits and what he gets from the pension plus Social Security, we're looking at full coverage for a memory care unit. No out-of-pocket. I didn't move. My son's voice was low, but the kitchen was only separated from the den by a half wall, and the house was quiet. I heard every word. He doesn't have memory problems, my son said. Then quieter yet. The aphasia, though. Dr. Okafor said it could progress. She said it might. That's different, honey. Her voice shifted. Patient, the way you talk to someone who's being difficult. Your father can't drive. He can barely use the phone. Last week he left the stove on for 4 hours. I left the stove on last month. That's not the same, and you know it. Silence. I just think, she continued, that Maplewood would give him so much more than we can. Round-the-clock staff, activities, other people his age. Maplewood. I knew the name. There was a facility about 8 miles east off the interstate. I'd driven past it hundreds of times without really seeing it. What about the house? My son asked. We'd list it in the spring. Market's good right now. We'd get probably 420, 440, somewhere in there. And put the proceeds where? A trust. For his care. And then whatever's left after. I mean, we'd be the beneficiaries anyway, eventually. My son didn't say anything for a moment. It just feels fast. It's been 8 months. I know how long it's been. Another silence. I heard her open a cabinet. The sound of mugs. We should talk to an elder law attorney, she said, just to understand the options, before we say anything to him. Yeah, my son said. Okay. I lay in Eleanor's chair and stared at the ceiling and did not make a sound. I want to be clear about something. In that moment, I wasn't angry. Anger came later. What I felt first was grief, a specific, cold grief that had nothing to do with loss of function and everything to do with recognition. The way you recognize a word in a foreign language you studied 40 years ago. Suddenly you know exactly what's being said, and you wish you didn't. The aphasia had been improving for 3 weeks by then. Dr. Okafor had been cautiously optimistic at my last appointment. The speech therapist, a young man named, well, I'll just call him my therapist, had told me the previous Friday that I was ahead of where most patients were at this stage. I hadn't told my son yet. I'd been planning to. I'd been thinking about how to say it, how to frame it, whether to do it over dinner or at an appointment so the doctor could explain the nuances. I didn't tell him that day. Or the next. I lay in Eleanor's chair and I thought about 31 years of grading papers. Thought about coaching junior varsity baseball for 12 of those years, a sport I barely understood because no one else would do it. Thought about paying for my son's college, his first car, his wedding at a venue in Columbus that cost more than my first year's salary. Thought about sitting with him in a hospital waiting room in 2019 when his wife miscarried, sitting there for 6 hours without speaking because there was nothing to say, just presence, just staying. I thought about all of it, and then I thought about Maplewood and the spring real estate market and the phrase whatever's left after. I picked up my phone and I opened the Notes app and I typed, "Call Bob Whitmore." Bob Whitmore had been my attorney for 20 years. Wills, the house deed, some small business stuff after I retired. His office was downtown on 5th Street, above a sandwich shop. He had a voice like a radio announcer and a handshake like a man who means what he says. I called him the next morning, while my son was at work and his wife was at her own job across town. My speech was slow and sometimes I had to stop and find a word, but Bob was patient. He'd known me a long time. "Walk me through what you want," he said. I told him. He asked a few questions. He was careful and thorough, and he didn't ask me whether I was sure. He knew me well enough to know I don't say things I don't mean. "I can have documents ready by end of next week," he said. "Sooner," I said. The word came out clean. "Sometimes they do." "Thursday," he said. "Come in Thursday afternoon. My daughter, I have a daughter too, 2 years older than my son. She lives in Portland, Oregon. We talk on the phone every Sunday, had for years. She'd flown out right after the stroke and stayed for 10 days, and when she left she made me promise to call if anything changed. I'll call her my daughter. But let me tell you something about her first. She drives a 12-year-old Subaru, works as an occupational therapist at a rehabilitation hospital, and when her mother was dying, she slept on a cot in the hospital room for 11 nights without being asked. She is the least complicated person I know. I called her on a Tuesday. "Dad," she said immediately, "you sound better." "Getting there," I said. I told her what I'd heard. I told her slowly, because the words still needed time, but I told her all of it. The Maplewood conversation, the house, the trust, the phrase whatever's left after. She was quiet for a long time. "Have you talked to Bob?" she asked. "Thursday," I said. A pause. Do you want me to come? Not yet. Okay. Another pause. Dad, I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry, I said. Just be ready. I went to Bob's office on Thursday. Took a rideshare the way I'd been doing since the driving stopped. Bob had coffee waiting and a legal pad full of notes. We spent 2 hours going through everything. The will, the house, the accounts, a revocable living trust we set up with my daughter as sole trustee and primary beneficiary. We added a durable power of attorney document naming her for healthcare and financial decisions. The existing documents, the ones that named my son and his wife as co-executors, were revoked. I signed everything. My hand was steadier than I expected. The following Sunday, my son and his wife came for dinner. She made pasta, which she was good at. We sat at the kitchen table and they talked about their week, about a trip they were thinking of taking in the fall, about a problem with their neighbor's fence. I listened and I nodded and I said enough words to keep the conversation moving. The aphasia made that easier, in a way. No one expects much from you when they think your words are broken. After dinner, my son washed the dishes, and his wife wiped down the counter, and it was a perfectly ordinary Sunday evening, and I sat at the kitchen table and drank my decaf and watched them, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. I felt patient. A few days later, I called my daughter and told her she could come. She booked a flight for the following Saturday. She didn't tell her brother she was coming. She arrived at noon. I picked her up. She got a rideshare to the house, and we sat in the living room, and I made the call to my son right there, with her, beside me, so she could hear. He picked up on the second ring. Hey, Dad. Everything okay? Fine, I said. I need you to come over, you and your wife. Today, if you can. A pause. Sure, we were just about to go grocery shopping, but yeah, we can come. Is something wrong? Nothing's wrong, I said. I have something to tell you. They arrived 45 minutes later. His wife had a casserole dish in her hands. She'd been planning to bring dinner, she said. She stopped in the doorway when she saw my daughter sitting on the couch. Oh, she said. I didn't know you were here. Just got in this morning, my daughter said. Her voice was easy, pleasant. They sat down. My son looked between us with the careful expression of a man who knows something is about to happen but can't locate the exit. I waited until everyone was settled. My speech has been coming back, I said. Dr. Okafor says I'm ahead of schedule. I wanted you to know. My son's face opened with what looked like genuine relief. Dad, that's great. That's really great. He looked at his wife. Isn't that great? She smiled. Wonderful news. There's more, I said. I reached for the folder Bob had given me. A plain manila folder, nothing dramatic about it. I set it on the coffee table. I've made some changes to my estate documents, I said. New will, new power of attorney. Your sister is now the trustee of my living trust and my healthcare proxy. The room went quiet in a specific way, not peaceful quiet, pressurized quiet. My son looked at the folder. He didn't reach for it. Dad, he said slowly, where is this coming from? February 22nd, I said. You were in the kitchen. I was in the den. The color left his face. That's not a figure of speech. I watched it happen, the way a cloud moves across the sun. His wife set down her coffee cup very carefully. I heard all of it, I said. I kept my voice level. This was not the time for anger, and I had moved past anger anyway, somewhere in the weeks of waiting. Maplewood. The spring listing, the trust. I looked at her specifically when I said the next part, whatever's left after. Nobody spoke. My daughter wasn't looking at them. She was looking at her hands folded in her lap. She'd asked me, the night before, whether I wanted her to say anything. I told her no. This was mine to say. I am not angry, I said, and I meant it. I understand that you were scared. Your mother is gone. I had a stroke. Things changed fast and you were looking for solutions. I paused to find the right words the way I always had to now. But those solutions were yours, not mine, and I am still here. I am still the one who gets to decide. My son put his face in his hands. Dad, he said, his voice was strange, compressed. I'm sorry. I don't. We were talking, just talking, we hadn't decided anything. I know, I said. That's why I waited. Waited for what? To see if you'd tell me. He looked up. His eyes were wet. You didn't, I said. Not unkindly, just the fact of it sitting there between us. His wife was very still. She wasn't crying. She was doing the thing she did when she was processing, that inward-looking stillness. I'd noticed it at Eleanor's funeral too, actually. I'd thought then that she was grieving. Now I wasn't sure what it was. The documents are already signed, I said. Bob Whitmore has the originals. These are copies if you want them. I gestured at the folder but didn't push it toward them. I'm not doing this to punish you. I'm doing it because I need to know that the person making decisions about my life is someone I can trust completely. Right now, that person is your sister. My daughter finally looked up. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. My son stayed another 2 hours. His wife left after 45 minutes. She said she had a headache, and maybe she did. My son and I sat at the kitchen table the way we used to when he was in high school and something had gone wrong at school or with a girl, and he needed to process it out loud. He talked. I listened. He said he'd been terrified since the stroke, that he hadn't known what to do, that his wife had pushed the Maplewood idea, and he'd gone along because going along felt like having a plan, and having a plan felt like not being helpless. I should have talked to you, he said. Yes, I said. Instead of around you. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Is there any way to the documents stay as they are? I said. For now. He nodded. He understood what for now meant. It meant the door wasn't closed. It meant that trust, once lost, can sometimes be rebuilt, but it has to be rebuilt slowly and from the ground up, and the work is his to do. He hugged me at the door when he left, a real hug, the kind that lasts a second too long. I patted his back the way I'd done when he was small. My daughter stayed for a week. We took slow walks around the neighborhood, the pace my body required now. We watched old movies on the couch, the ones Eleanor used to love, the 1950s ones with the sharp dialogue and the women who always had the best lines. We talked about her work, about Portland, about a man she'd been seeing who sounded decent and thoughtful. We talked about her mother. We hadn't really done that yet, the two of us, alone. On her last evening, she asked me what I was going to do with the house. Live in it, I said. She smiled. Good, for as long as I can, I added, and then we'll figure it out. Together, she said. I like that. I drove her to the airport in the morning. My daughter-in-law had arranged, quietly, for me to get my license reevaluated after the rehab, and I had passed 2 months prior, something my son had known but apparently hadn't mentioned to his wife during their planning sessions. The drive was about 25 minutes, and we didn't talk much. There's a kind of closeness that doesn't need words. I had learned to recognize it, these past months, as one of the few gifts the stroke had given me. At the departure drop-off, she got out and grabbed her bag from the back seat and leaned in through the passenger window. Call me Sunday, she said. I always do. She kissed my cheek, and then she was walking through the glass doors with her rolling suitcase, and I sat there for a moment before the cars behind me made their presence known with polite and then less polite honking. I pulled back into traffic. It was early April, and the trees along the highway were doing that particular Ohio thing, where they go from bare to green almost overnight, the change so fast it startles you every year even though you knew it was coming. I thought about a lot of things on that drive home. About Eleanor, about what she would have said. Probably something direct and funny, because that was her way. About my son, who was not a bad man, just a frightened one who had made the wrong calculation. About whether I had done right by everyone, including him. I thought about the history I used to teach. All those lessons about power and how people use it, about choices made under pressure, about how the same set of circumstances can make one person act nobly and another act from fear. I'd spent 31 years trying to help teenagers understand that history isn't just what happened. It's what people decided to do when they were scared and tired and didn't know how things would turn out. I didn't have a clean answer for any of it. I'm not sure clean answers exist. What I had was a house I wasn't selling, a daughter I could call on Sundays, a folder of legal documents in a filing cabinet, and a voice that was finding its way back to me, word by careful word. That felt like enough. That felt actually like quite a lot.